Blood dripped from Aaliyah Carter's split lip as she stared down 4 boys twice her size. Her phone trembled in her hand, one call away from unleashing hell itself. They laughed, circling closer, unaware that her father wasn't dead like everyone believed. He was watching. Waiting. And Caleb Carter, the most lethal Green Beret sniper in American history, didn't just eliminate targets. He erased entire problems from existence. The first time Aaliyah Carter walked through the iron gates of Westfield Academy, she knew she was entering enemy territory. September morning sunlight hit the Gothic stone facade like a spotlight on old money, generations of it, calcified into every brick, every manicured hedge, every gleaming luxury sedan idling in the circular drive. Mercedes, Range Rovers, a cherry-red Tesla with vanity plates that read, "Legacy." This wasn't just a private school. It was a fortress where America's elite sent their children to learn that the world belonged to them. Aaliyah adjusted the strap of her second-hand backpack and kept walking. She was 17 scholarship student, one of maybe 12 black kids in a sea of 500 faces that had never questioned whether they deserved to be here. Her natural hair was pulled into a neat bun. Her uniform navy blazer, white shirt, pleated skirt was pressed crisp because her mother Diana had ironed it herself at 5 that morning before her shift at the hospital. Pride and armor both. "Head up," Diana had told her at breakfast, squeezing her daughter's hand across their tiny kitchen table. "You earned this, baby. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Aaliyah hadn't forgotten, but she also hadn't expected to feel like an exhibit under glass from the moment she stepped onto campus. Eyes followed her. Whispers curled around her like smoke. "Is that the scholarship girl? Diversity hire? I heard she's from the South Side." Aaliyah's jaw tightened, but she kept her face neutral. Smooth. Unreadable. A skill she'd learned early, how to wear indifference like Kevlar when the world wanted to see you flinch. She found her locker B117 tucked in a corner near the science wing and was spinning the combination when a voice cut through the hallway noise. "Well, well, fresh blood." Aaliyah didn't look up immediately. She finished opening her locker, taking her time before turning to face the voice's owner. Logan Hastings. She'd seen his face in the school brochure. Captain of the lacrosse team. Honor roll. Son of Mayor Richard Hastings, whose campaign billboards still lined every major intersection in town, promising traditional values, modern solutions. Logan had his father's sharp jawline and cold blue eyes, the kind of eyes that had never known consequence. His blazer was tailored. His smile was a weapon. 3 boys flanked him, his entourage apparently. Ethan Park, whose family owned half the commercial real estate downtown. Bryce Kellerman, legacy admission, 4th generation Westfield. And Marcus Webb, the only other black student in the senior class who'd learned early that survival meant choosing the winning side. "Logan Hastings," the boy said, extending his hand like he was doing her a favor. "Welcome to Westfield." Aaliyah looked at his hand, then back at his face. She didn't shake it. "Aaliyah Carter." The smile flickered. Just a fraction. But it was enough to tell her everything she needed to know. "Carter." Logan repeated slowly, like he was tasting the name. "Any relation to?" "No." The word came out flat. Final. A door slamming shut. Logan's smile returned wider now, sharper. Didn't even finish the question. "Touchy." He glanced at his friends. "Must be tough coming from... Where'd you say you were from?" "I didn't." "Right. Well." He leaned against the locker next to hers, invading her space with practiced ease. "Westfield's pretty different from public school. Expectations are higher here. Standards matter. You'll figure it out. Or..." He shrugged. "You won't." Ethan snickered. Bryce was filming on his phone, not even hiding it. Aaliyah's pulse kicked up, but her voice stayed level. "Thanks for the orientation. I'll manage." She turned back to her locker, dismissing him. "Wrong move." Logan's hand shot out and slammed her locker door shut, inches from her fingers. The sound echoed down the hallway. Conversations stopped. People turned to watch. "Here's some free advice," Logan said quietly, his voice all sugar and venom. "At Westfield, you don't manage. You adapt. You smile. You show gratitude for the opportunity you've been given." His eyes traveled over her slowly, deliberately. "And you definitely don't disrespect people who could make your life very comfortable or very difficult." Aaliyah met his gaze without blinking. 9 years ago, her father had taught her something before he disappeared into whatever black site mission had swallowed him whole. Fear is just information. Use it. Don't feed it. "Noted," she said softly. "Now move." For a moment, just a heartbeat, something dangerous flickered across Logan's face. Then the mask snapped back into place. He stepped back with a theatrical bow. "Welcome to Westfield Academy, Aaliyah Carter. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of each other." He walked away, his crew trailing behind him like satellites orbiting a dying star. Marcus Webb glanced back at her, something apologetic in his eyes, before following. Aaliyah exhaled slowly and opened her locker. Her hands were steady. That was important. Never let them see you shake. From across the hallway, a girl with purple streaks in her blonde hair watched the entire exchange. She was tall, angular, dressed like she'd raided a vintage shop, and assembled an outfit that somehow worked. When Aaliyah caught her eye, the girl smiled real warmth, not the performative kind, and mouthed 2 words: "Welcome aboard." Calculus, chemistry, European history. The classes were rigorous, exactly as advertised. Aaliyah had prepared for that. What she hadn't prepared for was the casual cruelty that operated beneath the surface of every interaction, so normalized that most people didn't even notice it anymore. In AP Calc, when she answered a complex question correctly, the teacher, Mr. Pemberton, 60-something, tenured since the Reagan administration, looked genuinely surprised. "Well done, Miss Carter. Perhaps there's hope for the scholarship program after all." Polite applause from the class. Aaliyah smiled tightly and said nothing. What could she say? Thank you for the backhanded compliment. Thank you for setting the bar so low that basic competence is remarkable. In chemistry, she was assigned to a lab group with 3 girls who introduced themselves. Brittany, Sienna, and Madison then proceeded to discuss their weekend plans in the Hamptons as if Aaliyah were invisible. When she tried to contribute to the experiment, Sienna literally turned her back. "We've got this," Brittany said sweetly. "You can just observe. We know scholarship students sometimes aren't as prepared for the workload." Aaliyah documented it. Mental note time-stamped September 4th, 10:47 a.m. Chemistry period 3. Exclusion. Condescension. By lunch, she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with academics. The cafeteria was a social battlefield, territories clearly marked. The lacrosse players claimed the center tables. Theater kids huddled near the windows. Debate team commandeered a corner booth. Everyone else scattered into their designated orbits. Aaliyah grabbed a tray quinoa salad because even the cafeteria food screamed privilege and looked for empty space. "Hey, Carter." The purple-haired girl from earlier was waving her over to a table near the back. She was sitting with a lanky black kid in a vintage Public Enemy hoodie who was typing furiously on a laptop covered in activist stickers. Aaliyah hesitated, then walked over. "Zoe Chen," the girl said, gesturing to herself, then to her companion. "This is Dexter Williams. We're the Island of Misfit Toys. You're officially invited to join." Aaliyah set her tray down. "What makes you think I'm a misfit?" Dexter looked up from his laptop, adjusting his glasses. "You told Logan Hastings to move, on your first day. Either you're incredibly brave or you have a death wish." He grinned. "Either way, you're our people." Despite everything, Aaliyah felt her shoulders relax slightly. "That obvious?" "Honey, the whole school's already talking about it," Zoe said, spearing a tomato with her fork. Logan doesn't get told no very often, or ever actually. You've officially made yourself interesting. Lucky me. Could be worse, Dexter said. You could be boring. At Westfield, boring means invisible, and invisible means they can do whatever they want to, you without anyone noticing. He closed his laptop and leaned forward. But interesting. Interesting means they have to be creative. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, Zoe said honestly. It's supposed to prepare you. Westfield isn't just a school. It's a machine designed to produce more Westfield graduates. Same values, same blind spots, same entitled bullshit. People like us. She gestured between the three of them. We're glitches in the system, and the system doesn't like glitches. Aaliyah studied them both. Zoe with her art school aesthetic and sharp eyes. Dexter with his activist stickers and barely contained intensity. Outsiders who'd found each other. Survivors who'd learned to build lifeboats. How long have you been here? Aaliyah asked. Since freshman year, Zoe said. My parents think Westfield will open doors. What they don't realize is that the doors only open if you're willing to become someone else. I got in on academic merit, Dexter added. Full ride. My mom cried when we got the letter. She thought it was our way out. His laugh was bitter. Turns out they don't want you to get out. They want you to be grateful for being let in. Aaliyah felt something click into place. Recognition. Solidarity. These weren't just potential friends, they were allies in a war most people refused to acknowledge was happening. So, what do we do? She asked quietly. Zoe and Dexter exchanged a look. We document everything, Dexter said. Every microaggression, every double standard, every time they try to make us small. We survive, Zoe added. And if we're lucky, we burn it down on the way out. Aaliyah picked up her fork. I can work with that. The first month was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Nothing overt, nothing actionable. Just 1,000 small cuts designed to make her question whether she belonged. Her textbooks went missing from her locker. The library's copy of the AP history textbook she needed always checked out when she tried to reserve it, but somehow available the day after her exam. In English class, Mrs. Blackwell, young progressive, wore coexist pins, asked students to share their summer reading. When Aaliyah mentioned The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, Mrs. Blackwell smiled encouragingly. Wonderful. And did you find it accessible? The subtext was a bullhorn. Did you understand the big words? Logan Hastings raised his hand. I read Baldwin too. Great writer. Really makes you think about how far we've come, right? Like that stuff doesn't happen anymore. The class murmured agreement. Mrs. Blackwell nodded thoughtfully. Aaliyah's grip on her pen tightened until her knuckles went white. She said nothing. Adding to the documentation, September 18th, English Lit. Erasure of ongoing systemic racism. Teacher complicit. The online harassment started in week 3. Someone created a fake Instagram account, Westfield Confessions, and posted a hot or not list. Aaliyah was ranked dead last with comments beneath her photo that made her stomach turn, diversity hire taking up space. Affirmative action at work. Go back where you came from. When she reported it to the school's dean of students, Ms. Patricia Reeves, a thin woman with steel gray hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, the response was a masterclass in institutional gaslighting. These anonymous accounts are unfortunate, Ms. Reeves said, not looking up from her desk. But we can't control what students do off campus on private social media. Perhaps you might consider taking a break from social media for your own well-being. They're using the school's name, Aaliyah countered. Students are being targeted. Do you have proof that current Westfield students are behind the account? It knows details only students would know. Circumstantial. Ms. Reeves finally looked at her, and her eyes were cold. Miss Carter, I understand you're adjusting to Westfield's environment. It can be overwhelming. But we can't launch investigations every time someone's feelings are hurt. We need to teach resilience. Translation: Stop complaining. Learn your place. Aaliyah left the office with her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. That night she called her mother. Aaliyah Carter worked double shifts as an ICU nurse at County General, the kind of job that aged you faster than time. She was 42 but looked 50. Strong though. Unbreakable. She'd raised Aaliyah alone after Caleb disappeared on a mission that officially never happened in a country the government refused to name. "Tell me," Diana said simply when she answered. She always knew. Aaliyah told her everything. The isolation, the microaggressions, the Instagram account, the administration's refusal to act. When she finished, there was a long silence. "You want to come home?" Diana asked quietly. It was a genuine offer, no judgment. If Aaliyah wanted to walk away from Westfield transfer to public school, leave this fight behind, Diana would support it. But that wasn't who they'd raised her to be. "No," Aaliyah said. "I want to fight. I don't know how." Diana's voice was steady. "Your father used to say that the battlefield isn't always where you think it is. Sometimes the fight isn't about confronting the enemy head-on. It's about knowing the terrain better than they do. Being smarter, more patient. Dad also said that sometimes you have to take the shot. He did, but he also said you never take it unless you're sure it's the right target, the right moment, and you've got a clear exit." Diana paused. "Baby, you've got 3 more years at Westfield. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't burn yourself out in the first mile." Aaliyah closed her eyes. She could almost hear her father's voice, deep calm, the kind of voice that made you feel safe, even when the world was on fire. She'd been 8 years old the last time she'd heard it. 9 years of silence. 9 years of wondering if he was dead or just gone. "I miss him," she whispered. "Me too, sweetheart. Every single day." After they hung up, Aaliyah sat in her bedroom walls, covered in academic awards, AP prep books stacked on her desk, a faded photo of her father in his army dress uniform on her nightstand, and made a decision. If they wanted war, she'd give them war. Just not the kind they expected. By October, the temperature had dropped, literally and figuratively. Autumn in New England was a postcard, leaves the color of fire-crisp air that smelled like possibility. Westfield's campus looked like a movie set, all Gothic spires and ivy-covered walls. It was almost enough to make you forget the rot underneath. Almost. Logan Hastings had escalated from subtle sabotage to outright psychological warfare. It was calculated, creative, and always deniable. In AP History, Aaliyah presented a research project on the Tulsa Race Massacre. She'd spent weeks on it, primary sources, academic rigor, a PowerPoint that could have been a college thesis. When she finished, the room was silent. Logan raised his hand. "Great presentation," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But don't you think focusing so much on race is divisive? Like maybe we should be looking at how to bring people together instead of dwelling on the past?" Several students nodded. Mr. Harrison, the teacher, old white liberal, in the way that meant he'd never actually risked anything for his beliefs, cleared his throat. "That's an interesting point, Logan. Aaliyah, how would you respond?" The trap was obvious. Agree and undermine her own work. Disagree and be labeled difficult. Aaliyah met Logan's gaze directly. History isn't divisive. Ignoring history is. You can't heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge exists. "But at what point do we move forward?" Logan pressed. "My family's been in this country for generations. I didn't own slaves. Why should I be held responsible for something I didn't do?" There it is, Aaliyah thought. The playbook. Fragility masquerading as logic. "No one's asking you to be responsible for your ancestors," she said evenly. "But you are responsible for what you do with the advantages you inherited from that history. Pretending they don't exist doesn't make them go away. It just makes you complicit." The room went dead quiet. Mr. Harrison coughed awkwardly. Well, both perspectives have merit. Let's move on to the next presentation. But the damage was done. Aaliyah had committed the cardinal sin. She'd made Logan look bad in front of his peers. That afternoon, her locker was vandalized. The word uppity was written in silver Sharpie across her textbooks. When she reported it, security claimed the cameras in that hallway weren't working. Unfortunate timing, the guard said without sympathy. Zoe found her in the bathroom, scrubbing the slur off her calculus book with wet paper towels. Her hands were shaking despite her best efforts. "I got it on video," Zoe said quietly, holding up her phone. Marcus Webb, Logan's little lapdog. He was the lookout while Logan did it. Aaliyah looked up. "You saw them." "I see everything." Zoe sat on the edge of the sink. "What do you want to do?" "Report it." "To who Reeves she'll bury it." "Harrison. He'll give Logan a talking to and call it character building." Zoe shook her head. "The system here isn't broken, Aaliyah. It's working exactly as designed. It protects people like Logan and punishes people like us." "So what?" Aaliyah's voice cracked slightly. "We just take it?" "No." Dexter's voice came from the bathroom door. He'd been standing there silent. "We collect evidence. Every single thing they do, every cover-up, every lie. And when we have enough," he smiled grimly, "we make sure the whole world sees what Westfield Academy really is." Aaliyah looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, pride refusing to bend. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "The battlefield isn't always where you think it is." "Okay," she said softly. "Let's build the case." November brought the first snow and the first real escalation. Aaliyah's mother Diana had requested a meeting with the school board to address the ongoing harassment. It was a formal process, written complaint documentation of incidents request for administrative review. Diana had done everything by the book. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in the administrative building's conference room. Diana arrived early, wearing her best blazer, the one she saved for job interviews and funerals. Aaliyah came with her, along with a folder full of screenshots, time-stamped incidents, and witness statements from Zoe and Dexter. The school board consisted of 7 members. 6 were white. All were wealthy. Several had children or grandchildren enrolled at Westfield. The chairman, Robert Kellerman Bryce's grandfather, sat at the head of the table like a judge presiding over a foregone conclusion. "Ms. Carter," Kellerman said with performative politeness, "thank you for coming. We've reviewed your complaint. We take all allegations seriously." Diana sat up straighter. "Then you'll be taking action against the students involved in the harassment campaign against my daughter." "Well," Kellerman steepled his fingers, "that's complicated. You see, we've found no concrete evidence linking any specific students to the Instagram account. These social media platforms are notoriously difficult to trace." "The account uses Westfield's name," Diana countered. "It posts about events that only students would know about. It's targeting my daughter specifically." "Unfortunate, certainly, but not necessarily actionable without proof." Aaliyah spoke up. "What about the vandalism? My locker was defaced with a racial slur. We have video of students doing it." One of the board members, a woman named Patricia Donovan, whose family had endowed the library, smiled thinly. "Video from another student's phone, taken without consent. That's hardly admissible. And even if it were, it shows boys behaving badly, teenage immaturity. Hardly grounds for expulsion." She said racial slur. Diana's voice was ice. "A targeted hate crime." "We prefer not to use such inflammatory language," Kellerman interjected smoothly. "It suggests intent to harm, which we have no proof of. These boys, if it was indeed them, may have simply been engaging in poor taste humor without understanding the impact." Aaliyah felt rage building in her chest, like pressure in a sealed container. "Poor taste humor. They called me—" "We know what they wrote, Miss Carter." Kellerman's voice hardened slightly. And I would suggest that your reaction to these incidents might be part of the problem. Westfield Academy prides itself on producing resilient, mature young adults, students who can handle adversity without resorting to victimhood. The word hung in the air like a curse. Diana stood up slowly. Let me make sure I understand. My daughter, who earned her place here on merit, who maintains a 4.0 GPA, who has done everything right, is being targeted by students who feel entitled to make her life hell. And your solution is to tell her to toughen up. Our solution, another board member chimed in, is to encourage all students to focus on their education rather than social drama. Social drama? Diana's laugh was sharp. Is that what we're calling racism now? No one here denies that racism exists, Kellerman said carefully. But we also don't believe it serves anyone to see it around every corner. Sometimes, Ms. Carter, a cigar is just a cigar. And sometimes teenagers are cruel to each other for reasons that have nothing to do with race. Aaliyah watched her mother's hands clench into fists. Watched her swallow words that would have felt righteous to speak, but would ultimately change nothing. Because this was the system. This was how it worked. Not through overt evil, but through 1,000 small acts of complicity. Through benefit of the doubt extended infinitely in one direction and never in the other. Through rules that protected power and punished vulnerability. Diana gathered her folder. Thank you for your time. Ms. Carter, Kellerman called as they headed for the door. We do hope Aaliyah will continue to thrive at Westfield. It's a tremendous opportunity. It would be a shame if external factors interfered with her success here. The threat was clear. Don't make waves or we'll make sure she pays for it. In the parking lot, Diana sat in their 15-year-old Honda, with her hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Mom, Aaliyah asked quietly, they're not going to help us. Diana's voice was hollow. They're protecting their own. They always have been. So what do we do? Diana turned to look at her daughter, this brilliant, beautiful, strong girl who deserved so much better than this. We survive. We adapt. And we wait for the right moment to fight back. But both of them knew that moment was running out, because the next day, Diana got a letter from County General Hospital. Her contract was being reorganized. Budget cuts, position eliminated. Effective immediately. No severance, no warning, no coincidence. The Hastings family donated $2 million annually to County General. Mayor Richard Hastings sat on the hospital's board of directors. The message was clear. This is what happens when you challenge power. December arrived like a killing frost. The Carter apartment, which had always been modest but comfortable, began to feel like a prison. Bills stacked up. Diana started driving for Uber at night after job hunting all day. Aaliyah took a weekend position at a coffee shop, lying about her age to get the hours. At Westfield, the pressure intensified. Logan and his crew had moved beyond harassment into something darker. Aaliyah's personal information appeared on websites she'd never visited. Her home address, her mother's phone number. The listing said she was looking for sugar daddies. The calls started. Messages from strange men. Explicit, threatening, vile. When Aaliyah showed up to school, exhausted from another sleepless night, Logan was waiting at her locker. You look tired, he said with mock concern. Everything okay at home? Aaliyah stared at him, really looked at him. This boy who had everything and thought that gave him the right to take more, who'd been raised to believe that people like her were obstacles to be removed, problems to be solved. Why? She asked simply. Why do you care so much about making me miserable? Logan's mask slipped for just a moment. Behind the practiced smile, she saw something ugly, something wounded. Because you don't belong here, he said quietly. And everyone knows it except you. You're playing a game you can't win. The sooner you accept that, the easier this gets for everyone. Or, Or we keep going. And trust me, Carter, you haven't seen anything yet." He walked away, leaving Aaliyah standing in the hallway with her heart pounding and her mind racing. That night, she sat in her room and did something she hadn't done in 9 years. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a folded letter, worn soft from handling, written in her father's careful script. He'd left it for her the day he deployed on what became his final mission. "Princess, if you're reading this, it means I've been gone a while. Long enough that you're wondering if I'm coming back. I can't tell you where I am or what I'm doing. I can tell you this: some battles are worth fighting even when the odds are against you. Especially then. The world isn't fair. You'll learn that fast. People with power will try to make you small. They'll tell you it's for your own good. They'll smile while they do it. Don't believe them. You're a Carter. We don't break. We adapt. We survive. And when the moment comes, and it will come, we strike with precision. One shot. Center mass. No hesitation. Stay strong. Stay smart. And remember, real power isn't about force. It's about knowing exactly when and how to use it. I love you always. Dad." Aaliyah folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She pulled out her laptop and opened a new document. At the top, she typed, "The Westfield Truth Project." Then she began writing everything down. Every incident, every name, every cover-up. Every connection between the school board, the Hastings family, and the systematic abuse that kept the machine running. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it. Didn't know if it would matter. But she knew one thing: if they wanted to bury her, she'd make damn sure the world saw her fighting back. Somewhere in the darkness in mountains she couldn't name, in a life lived off the grid to protect the family he'd left behind, Caleb Carter opened his eyes. He'd felt it. A shift in the air. A signal he'd been waiting 9 years to receive. His daughter needed him. And the most lethal sniper in Green Beret history was about to come home. The hallway cameras at Westfield Academy recorded everything. Every smile, every threat, every moment of casual cruelty. But in the maintenance office where security footage was stored, certain files had a way of disappearing. Certain incidents became invisible. Unless someone was keeping their own records. Unless someone refused to let the truth die in the dark. Aaliyah Carter was that someone. And the war she didn't know she was fighting, it was about to go kinetic. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning in mid-December, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Diana found it on their apartment doorstep when she left for another round of job interviews. She brought it inside, turning it over in her hands with the wariness of someone who'd learned that unexpected deliveries rarely brought good news. The weight was wrong. Too light for books, too heavy for documents. "Aaliyah," she called up the stairs. "Come down here." Aaliyah appeared in her Westfield uniform backpack, already slung over one shoulder. She'd been leaving earlier these days, catching the first bus to avoid Logan and his crew in the parking lot. Small tactical adjustments. Survival strategies. "What is it?" she asked. Diana set the package on their kitchen table. "I don't know. It's addressed to both of us." They stared at it for a long moment, both thinking the same thing. After everything that had happened, the online harassment, the threatening calls, the vandalism, a mysterious package felt less like a gift and more like a threat. Aaliyah pulled out her phone. "I'm recording this, just in case." She opened it slowly, half expecting something horrible to spill out. Instead, she found a prepaid cell phone, the kind you could buy with cash at any convenience store. Untraceable. Beneath it was a single piece of paper with 2 words written in handwriting she hadn't seen in 9 years. "Call me." The phone clattered from Aaliyah's hands onto the table. Diana picked up the paper, and all the color drained from her face. "Oh my God. That's Dad's handwriting." Aaliyah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, that's Dad's handwriting. It can't be." But Diana's hands were shaking as she picked up the phone, turning it over like it might explode. He's been gone for 9 years. The army said a lot of things. Aaliyah grabbed the phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. There was only one number saved in the contacts. No name. Just a string of digits. Diana caught her wrist. Baby, wait. We don't know what this is. It could be someone pretending. Someone trying to hurt us more. Or it could be him. Aaliyah met her mother's eyes. Mom, what if he's alive? The question hung between them, loaded with 9 years of grief, anger, hope, and desperate longing. Diana had worn her wedding ring on a chain around her neck since the day 2 soldiers in dress uniforms knocked on their door and told her Caleb Carter was missing in action, presumed dead. She'd never taken it off, never dated, never stopped waiting. Call, Diana whispered, but put it on speaker. Aaliyah's finger hovered over the dial button. Then she pressed it. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, a voice answered, deep, familiar, impossibly alive. Princess. Aaliyah's knees buckled. She sat down hard in the kitchen chair, tears already streaming down her face. Diana covered her mouth with both hands, sobbing silently. Dad? Aaliyah managed. Is that really you? It's me, baby girl. I know you have questions. I know you're angry. But right now, I need you to listen carefully. Okay. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Calm, steady, the kind of voice that made you believe everything would be okay, even when the world was ending. But there was something else beneath it now. An edge, a controlled fury that made her skin prickle. I'm listening, she said. First, I need you to know that everything I did leaving staying gone, it was to protect you and your mother. The mission I was on, the people involved, they're dangerous. Staying dead kept you safe. Do you understand? No. The word came out sharp. I don't understand how abandoning us kept us safe. I don't understand how letting us think you were dead for 9 years was protection. Diana reached for the phone. Caleb, it's me. A pause. When he spoke again, his voice cracked slightly. Diana. God, I've missed your voice. Then why? Diana's anger matched her daughter's. Why now, after all this time? Because they're not safe anymore. The warmth vanished from his tone, replaced by something cold and tactical. I've been monitoring your lives from a distance, staying far enough away to keep my enemies from finding you, but close enough to watch. And what I'm seeing now... He exhaled slowly. Aaliyah, tell me about Westfield Academy. Tell me about Logan Hastings. Aaliyah's breath caught. How do you know about Logan? I know about everything. The Instagram account, the harassment, the school board meeting, your mother losing her job. Each word was precise, clipped. I know about the package someone left on your car windshield last week, the one with the dead rat inside, and a note that said, "This is what trash smells like." Aaliyah hadn't told her mother about that. She'd cleaned it up herself, gagging terrified, and thrown it away before Diana could see. But somehow her father knew. How long have you been watching us? She asked quietly. Long enough to know that the situation has escalated beyond psychological harassment. Long enough to see the pattern. The Hastings family doesn't just destroy people socially. They destroy them completely, financially, physically, and they have the resources to make it look like accidents. You're scaring me, Aaliyah whispered. Good. You should be scared, but you shouldn't be alone. Caleb's voice softened slightly. I'm coming home. Not as your father, not yet. There's work to do first. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Aaliyah looked at her mother. Diana nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. What do you need us to do? Aaliyah asked. Keep that phone hidden. Don't tell anyone about it. Not your friends, not teachers, no one. When I need to reach you, I'll call. And Aaliyah. He paused. The documentation you've been keeping, the Westfield Truth Project, that's good work. Smart. Keep doing it. I'm going to need everything you've collected. How do you know about? Because you're my daughter, and I taught you to be prepared. She could hear the pride in his voice. I'll be in touch soon. Stay alert, stay safe, and remember what I always told you. The battlefield isn't always where you think it is, Aaliyah recited automatically. That's my girl. I love you both. This ends soon. The line went dead. Aaliyah and Diana sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence, staring at the phone like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. Finally, Diana spoke. He's alive. Caleb is alive. And he's coming back. Aaliyah felt something shift inside her chest. 9 years of abandonment issues, of wondering if she'd been worth staying for, of building walls around the part of her heart that had belonged to her father, all of it cracking open. Mom, what if this makes things worse? Diana reached across the table and gripped her daughter's hand. Baby, I don't think they can get much worse. And if your father says he can help... She trailed off, then laughed a broken, desperate sound. God, I can't believe I'm even saying this. Your father, he's alive. Aaliyah looked down at the phone. Who is he now? Who did he become while he was gone? I don't know, Diana admitted. But I know who he was. And if even half of that man is still in there... She squeezed Aaliyah's hand tighter. We're going to be okay. Aaliyah wanted to believe her. She really did. But that night when she tried to sleep, all she could think about was her father's voice on the phone. That controlled fury. That edge of something dangerous. He wasn't the man who'd left 9 years ago. Whatever he'd been doing, wherever he'd been, it had changed him, forged him into something harder. And now he was coming home to a battlefield. The real question was, would there be anything left standing when the smoke cleared? The vandalism happened 3 days before Christmas break. Aaliyah came home from her shift at the coffee shop to find their apartment's front door hanging open. Not kicked in, that would have been too obvious. The lock had been picked cleanly, professionally. Inside their home had been destroyed with calculated precision. Furniture overturned, dishes smashed, Diana's nursing textbooks carefully maintained because she couldn't afford replacements torn to pieces and scattered like confetti. Aaliyah's laptop, which contained months of documentation for the Westfield Truth Project, was gone. So was Diana's jewelry box, including the wedding ring she kept on that chain. But the worst part was the message spray-painted across their living room wall in dripping red letters, "Know your place." Diana stood in the doorway, still in her Uber driver vest, and just stared. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just looked at the destruction of everything they'd worked for and went very, very quiet. Mom, Aaliyah said carefully, we need to call the police. And tell them what? Diana's voice was flat. That the mayor's son is targeting us, that we have no proof, that the school board already made it clear whose side they're on. She walked slowly into the apartment, glass crunching under her shoes. They'll write a report. They'll tell us to get better locks. And then they'll do nothing. She was right. Aaliyah knew she was right. But standing in the wreckage of their home, she felt something inside her snap. No, she said quietly. We're not doing nothing. She pulled out the burner phone and dialed the only number saved. He answered on the first ring. What happened? They broke into our apartment, destroyed everything, stole my laptop with all the documentation. Aaliyah's voice was shaking now, rage and fear mixing into something combustible. Dad, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing until you break or disappear. I know. His voice was ice. Take pictures of everything, every piece of damage. Then pack bags for you and your mother. Essentials only. You're not staying there tonight. Where are we supposed to go? I'm texting you an address right now. It's a motel on the south side. Rooms already paid for cash under the name Johnson. Go there. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. When? Tonight. I'm already on my way. A pause. Aaliyah, it's time. No more watching from the shadows. If they want to escalate, we'll show them what escalation really looks like." The line went dead. A moment later, a text appeared with an address. Diana had been listening to the whole conversation. She looked at Aaliyah with exhausted eyes. "He's really coming. He's really coming." They packed quickly closed toiletries' important documents. Diana grabbed the framed photo of Caleb in his dress uniform from the mantel. Aaliyah took her father's letter from the wooden box. Everything else could be replaced or abandoned. Before they left, Aaliyah stood in the doorway and photographed the destruction from every angle. The message on the wall, the smashed dishes, the torn textbooks, evidence, ammunition. The Westfield Truth Project might be on that stolen laptop, but she'd been smart enough to back everything up to a cloud account. They could take her computer. They couldn't take what she knew. The motel was exactly what you'd expect from a $50 a night cash operation. Suspicious stains, flickering lights, the smell of old cigarettes embedded in the walls. But the door had a deadbolt and a chain, and that was more security than their apartment had provided. They waited. 9 o'clock became 10. 10 became 11. Diana dozed fitfully on one of the twin beds. Aaliyah sat by the window, peeking through the curtains every time headlights swept across the parking lot. At 11:47 p.m., a black pickup truck pulled in. No plates. Tinted windows. A man got out, tall, lean, moving with the kind of economy that spoke to thousands of hours of combat training. He wore dark jeans, a weathered jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low. He looked up at their window. Even from this distance, even after 9 years, Aaliyah recognized his eyes. "Mom," she whispered. "He's here." Diana bolted upright. They stood together holding hands as footsteps approached down the exterior corridor. 3 soft knocks on the door. A pause. 2 more knocks. Aaliyah's hand trembled as she undid the chain and deadbolt. She opened the door. Caleb Carter stood in the doorway, backlit by the motel's flickering neon sign. He'd aged lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, gray threading through his close-cropped hair, a scar running along his jawline. But the eyes were the same, dark brown, intelligent, fierce. "Hi, Princess," he said softly. Aaliyah launched herself at him, and he caught her like he'd been preparing for the impact. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, 9 years of grief and anger and longing pouring out all at once. "I'm sorry," Caleb murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I wanted to come back so many times, but I couldn't risk." "I know." Aaliyah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm angry at you. I'm so angry. But I'm also just... You're here. You're really here." "I'm here." He looked past her to Diana, who stood frozen by the bed. "Hi, Di." Diana crossed the room in 3 strides and slapped him. The crack echoed in the small room. Caleb didn't flinch, just took it. 9 years. Diana said, her voice breaking. 9 years, Caleb. Do you have any idea what that was like, raising our daughter alone? Wondering every single day if you were dead, or if you just decided we weren't worth coming back to. I know. You don't know. You weren't here. Diana's hands were shaking. You weren't here for her first period, or her first heartbreak, or the night she cried herself to sleep because kids at school said her daddy abandoned her. You weren't here when I had to work 3 jobs just to keep us in that apartment. You weren't here. You're right, I wasn't. Caleb's voice was rough. And I can't give you those years back. I can't fix what I broke. But I can tell you that every single day I was gone, I was watching, making sure you were safe, making sure the people who wanted to hurt you couldn't find you. And I can tell you that I never stopped loving you, either of you, not for 1 second. Diana stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Then she grabbed his jacket and pulled him into a fierce embrace, burying her face against his chest. Don't you ever do that again, she whispered. Don't you dare. Never. I promise. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head. Over Diana's shoulder, his eyes met Aaliyah's. We have work to do, But first, I need to know everything. Every detail. Every name. Every incident. Aaliyah wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay. But Dad, what exactly are we doing here? What's the plan? Caleb gently released Diana and sat down on the edge of the bed. When he looked at his daughter, there was something terrifying in his expression. Not anger. Anger was hot, impulsive. This was cold. Calculated. The look of a man who'd spent years learning how to dismantle enemies with surgical precision. The plan, he said quietly, is to show Westfield Academy and the Hastings family exactly what happens when they target a Green Beret's daughter. The plan is to take everything they've built, their reputation, their power, their sense of invincibility, and burn it to the ground so thoroughly that they'll never threaten another family again. How? Aaliyah asked. Caleb smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Information warfare. Exposure. Turning their own system against them. I've spent 9 years working in the shadows, taking down networks that thought they were untouchable. The Hastings family. They're amateurs compared to the enemies I've faced. He pulled out a tablet from his jacket and opened it. I've been compiling my own file. Financial records showing money laundering through the Hastings Foundation. Evidence of bribes to school board members. Connection between Mayor Hastings and 3 separate police brutality cover-ups. Tax evasion, zoning violations, affairs, embezzlement. He looked up. The Westfield Truth Project is good, but combined with what I have, we can destroy them legally, publicly, and completely. Diana sat down next to him, staring at the tablet. How did you get all this? I have friends in interesting places, people who owe me favors, people who understand that sometimes the system needs to be reminded that no one is above accountability. He scrolled through files. But I need Aaliyah's documentation to establish the pattern of abuse. To show that this isn't just corruption, it's targeted harassment with racial motivation. That makes it a federal civil rights case. Aaliyah pulled out her phone and accessed her cloud backup. I've got everything. Screenshots, videos, witness statements, time-stamped incidents going back to September. Zoe Chen and Dexter Williams helped me document it all. Smart friends. Caleb connected her phone to his tablet, downloading the files. Tomorrow I'm going to pay a visit to Westfield Academy. Not as your father, they don't know I exist yet. As a concerned parent considering enrollment for my fictional daughter, I need to see the battlefield. They'll never let you just walk in, Diana said. They will if I make a large enough donation. $10,000 buys a lot of access. At their shocked expressions, he added, I've been saving my combat pay for 9 years. Never touched it. It's time to put it to use. And what happens after you see the school? Aaliyah asked. Caleb's expression went cold again. Then, I request a meeting with Principal Whitmore Dean Reeves and the school board chairman. And I very politely explain that they have 48 hours to expel Logan Hastings and his accomplices, issue a public apology to you, and implement a comprehensive anti-harassment policy with third-party oversight. They'll refuse, Aaliyah said. I'm counting on it. Caleb closed the tablet. Because when they do, I'll release everything to the media, the local papers, the state attorney general's office, the FBI's civil rights division, and social media, because nothing burns faster than viral outrage. He looked at his daughter. They wanted to make an example of you. We're going to make an example of them. Diana gripped Caleb's hand. This is dangerous. If the Hastings family is as connected as you say, they're powerful in this town. But I've been operating in countries where crossing the wrong person means your entire family disappears. The Hastings family is used to intimidating people who have something to lose. I've already lost 9 years with my family. I've got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Aaliyah felt something uncurl in her chest. For months, she'd been fighting alone, absorbing blow after blow, wondering when it would end. Now, finally, she had an ally. Not just any ally, someone who knew how to win wars that couldn't be won with conventional weapons. When do we start? She asked. We already have. Caleb stood up. Get some rest. Both of you. Tomorrow the counteroffensive begins." After he left, promising to return in the morning, giving them a secure phone to reach him, Diana and Aaliyah lay in their separate twin beds in the dark. "Do you trust him?" Diana asked quietly. Aaliyah thought about the letter her father had written 9 years ago, about the man who'd taught her to be strong, to be smart, to wait for the right moment, about the voice on the phone that had promised to end this. "Yeah," she said finally, "I do. He's different now, harder, but he's still Dad." "I hope you're right." "Me too." But as Aaliyah finally drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the image of her father's smile when he'd talked about burning their enemy's world down. It was the smile of a man who'd learned to weaponize his pain, who'd spent 9 years becoming something more dangerous than his enemies could imagine. And tomorrow, Westfield Academy was going to meet him. The next morning, Caleb picked them up at dawn. They drove through the empty streets as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given the circumstances. He'd brought coffee and breakfast sandwiches, small gestures of normalcy that felt surreal. "Where are we going?" Aaliyah asked from the back seat. "First stop the local police station. We're filing an official report about the break-in, getting it on record even if they won't do anything about it." Caleb glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Then I'm taking you to school." "What number, Dad? I can't go back there." "Not after." "Yes, you can. And you will." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "Because if you don't show up, they win. They get to drive you out, prove that you don't belong. And more importantly, I need you there as my eyes on the inside while I work the outside." Diana turned in the passenger seat. "Caleb is that safe?" "I'll be watching the whole time, and Aaliyah won't be alone. She has her friends. Plus..." He pulled a small device from his pocket and handed it to Aaliyah. "Audio recorder, voice activated. Clip it inside your blazer. If anyone threatens you, approaches, you says anything at all, we'll have evidence." Aaliyah took the device, feeling its weight. "You want me to be bait?" "I want you to be brave. There's a difference." Caleb pulled into the police station parking lot. "Everything I'm about to do relies on establishing a clear pattern of harassment and institutional failure to protect you. You disappearing plays into their narrative. You staying, documenting, standing your ground. That's power." He was right, and Aaliyah hated it. But she also understood it. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every kid who'd been bullied into silence. Every family the Hastings dynasty had crushed. Every time the system had chosen power over justice. The police report took 30 minutes. The officer, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, took notes with obvious skepticism. "And you're sure you didn't leave the door unlocked?" he asked Diana. "I'm sure." "No signs of forced entry. Lock was picked clean. That suggests professional work." "Or someone with basic lock-picking skills and YouTube," Caleb interjected. "Caleb, seems like information the investigator should pursue." Rodriguez looked at Caleb with new interest. "You're the father. Where have you been?" "Working overseas. Just got back." Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Why is that relevant to the break-in?" "Just gathering information." Rodriguez closed his notebook. "Look, I'll file the report. But without prints, without witnesses, without any evidence beyond property damage, there's not much we can do." "Understood," Caleb said smoothly. "Just make sure it's in the system, with today's date. That's all we need." Outside, Diana exhaled shakily. He didn't care at all. He cared enough to file the report. That's all that matters. Caleb checked his watch. "Aaliyah, school starts in 40 minutes. Let's go." The drive to Westfield Academy was silent. When they pulled up to the Gothic gates, Aaliyah felt her stomach clench. Everything looked the same. The pristine grounds, the expensive cars, the casual cruelty hiding behind institutional respectability. Caleb put the truck in park and turned to look at his daughter. "You can do this." "What if they try something?" Then you document it. You stay calm. You remember that you're not alone anymore. He reached back and squeezed her hand. And you remember that by the end of this week, they're going to wish they'd never heard the name Carter. Aaliyah grabbed her backpack and opened the door. She was halfway out when Caleb called her name. "Princess." She looked back. "My daughter isn't going anywhere," he said quietly, fiercely. "Make sure they know that." Aaliyah nodded, feeling steel in her spine that hadn't been there before. She walked through those iron gates with her head high, the audio recorder clipped inside her blazer-like armor. Behind her, Caleb watched until she disappeared into the building. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's Carter. I need everything you have on Mayor Richard Hastings, his son Logan, and the Westfield Academy Board of Directors. Financial records, communication logs, everything. And I need it by end of business today. No money's not an issue. Because someone made the mistake of threatening my family, and I'm about to teach them what happens when you go to war with a ghost who's got nothing left to lose." He ended the call and stared at the school building, his expression unreadable. The battlefield was set. The pieces were moving. And Caleb Carter, the most lethal Green Beret sniper in American history, was about to remind everyone why some enemies should stay buried. Because when you dig up a ghost, you'd better be prepared for haunting. The hallways of Westfield Academy felt different that morning. Or maybe Aaliyah was different. She walked through the familiar corridors, with the audio recorder pressed against her ribs like a secret heartbeat, and for the first time in months, she wasn't walking alone. Her father was out there somewhere, watching, planning, preparing to dismantle everything that had tried to break her. Zoe found her at her locker before first period, purple-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes sharp with concern. "Where the hell have you been? You didn't answer any of my texts last night. Dexter and I were about to file a missing persons report." She stopped, really looking at Aaliyah. "Jesus, what happened? You look like you haven't slept." Aaliyah glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to overhear. "Can't talk here. Meet me in the library during lunch. Bring Dexter. I have something to tell you both." "Aaliyah, you're scaring me." "Good. Everyone should be scared right now." She slammed her locker shut harder than necessary. But not of them anymore. Logan appeared at the end of the hallway like he'd been summoned by the sound of her voice. He was wearing his lacrosse team jacket, surrounded by his usual crew, Ethan, Bryce, and Marcus trailing behind, like pilot fish following a shark. When he saw Aaliyah, his smile was all teeth. "Well, well. Carter actually showed up today. I'm impressed." He sauntered closer, and Aaliyah's hand instinctively moved to the recorder hidden in her blazer. "How's the apartment get all that mess cleaned up?" The world narrowed to a pinpoint. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably given the order himself. Zoe stepped between them. "Back off, Hastings. Or what, you'll draw me an angry picture." Logan laughed. "This doesn't concern you, Chen. Why don't you go play artist somewhere else? Why don't you go play entitled rich boy somewhere else?" Zoe shot back. "Oh wait, that's literally all you know how to do." Logan's smile vanished. "You really want to do this? Both of you. Because I promise I can make your lives so much worse than they already are. Worse than breaking into my home." Aaliyah's voice was steady cold. "Worse than destroying everything my mother and I own. Worse than spray painting threats on our walls." "I don't know what you're talking about." Logan's expression was pure innocence, but his eyes gleamed with malice. "That sounds terrible, though. Maybe you should move to a better neighborhood. I hear the crime rate is really bad where you live." Ethan snickered. Bryce was filming again, phone held at waist level, like he thought no one could see. "You know what's interesting?" Aaliyah said quietly. "For someone who supposedly doesn't know anything about it, you sure know a lot of specific details. Crime rate, neighborhood, makes a person wonder." Logan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Let me make this really simple for you, Carter. You don't belong here. You never did. And the sooner you accept that and disappear back to whatever ghetto you crawled out of, the easier this gets for everyone. Or He shrugged. We can keep playing this game, but I promise you, I've got infinite resources and infinite patience. What do you have? Aaliyah met his eyes and smiled. It was her father's smile, the cold, calculated one from the motel room. You'd be surprised. Something flickered across Logan's face. Uncertainty. Just for a second. Then the mask snapped back. We'll see. Enjoy your day, Carter. All of it. He walked away, his entourage following. Marcus Webb glanced back at Aaliyah, and this time there was something different in his expression. Not apology. Fear. Zoe grabbed Aaliyah's arm. Okay, you're definitely telling me what's going on. Library lunch, no excuses. I'll be there, Aaliyah promised. Just be careful. Okay? Things are about to get really complicated. She made it through morning classes on autopilot, the recorder capturing everything. Mrs. Blackwell's subtle condescension in English, Mr. Pemberton's surprised face when she aced the pop quiz in calculus, the whispers that followed her through the hallways like a toxic cloud. At lunch, she found Zoe and Dexter in the library's back corner, hidden behind stacks of outdated encyclopedias that no one ever used. Dexter had his laptop open, already typing frantically. Okay, spill, Zoe demanded, and don't leave anything out. Aaliyah told them everything. The break-in, the burner phone. Her father alive, impossibly alive, and coming for the people who'd targeted his family. The plan to expose Westfield's corruption. The audio recorder currently documenting every interaction. When she finished, Dexter and Zoe stared at her in stunned silence. Your dad, Dexter said slowly. The Green Beret. The one everyone thought was dead. He's been alive this whole time. And he's here to burn Westfield to the ground, Aaliyah confirmed. Holy shit. Zoe leaned back in her chair. That's the most badass thing I've ever heard, but also terrifying. If your dad goes after the Hastings family, they're going to retaliate hard. Let them try. Aaliyah felt that steel in her spine again. My father spent 9 years taking down terrorists and war criminals. Logan Hastings and his corrupt little empire. They're amateurs. Dexter was already typing. If you're building a case, you need more than just your documentation. You need to connect the dots between the school board, the Hastings family money, and the systematic cover-ups. I can help with that. I've been tracking the board members' financial connections for months. It's like a spider web of corruption. Why? Aaliyah asked. Because I got tired of being invisible. Tired of watching them protect their own, while people like us get crushed. He turned his laptop around, showing a complex network diagram. Look, Robert Kellerman's construction company gets all the school renovation contracts. Patricia Donovan's husband's law firm represents the Hastings Foundation. Mayor Hastings' campaign received donations from every single board member's family. It's not just nepotism, it's organized collusion. Zoe whistled low. You're sitting on a nuclear bomb. We all are now, Dexter said. Question is, when do we detonate it? Before Aaliyah could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from her father's secure number meeting with Principal Whitmore in 1 hour. Donated $15,000 to scholarship fund. They think I'm a wealthy parent. Stay alert. Things are going to move fast now. She showed the text to Zoe and Dexter. Your dad is hardcore, Zoe said admiringly. Buying his way in to scope out the enemy. That's some spy movie shit. He's not scoping, Aaliyah corrected. He's giving them one chance to do the right thing before he destroys them. My father believes in precision, clean shots, no collateral damage if it can be avoided. And if they don't take the chance, Dexter asked, then he takes the shot. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As they gathered their things, Aaliyah felt her phone buzz again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number, Lake parking lot. 4 p.m. Come alone if you want this to stop. Her blood went cold. She showed it to Zoe and Dexter. That's a trap, Zoe said immediately. You can't go. It's absolutely a trap. Aaliyah agreed. Which is why I'm going. Are you insane? No, I'm tactical. She forwarded the text to her father. Logan wants to escalate fine. Let's give him a chance to show his true colors on record. The audio recorder runs for 8 hours. And if my dad's meeting with the principal ends badly, we need undeniable proof that this isn't just teenage drama. We need proof of intent to harm. Dexter looked sick. Aaliyah, they could really hurt you. These aren't just bullies anymore. They're dangerous. I know, but I won't be alone. Her phone buzzed with her father's response. Don't go. Too dangerous. I'll handle it. She texted back, this is my fight too, and we need the evidence. Trust me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, I'll be there. You won't see me, but I'll be there. Do not engage. Record everything and get out at first sign of real danger. Aaliyah pocketed her phone and looked at her friends. If something goes wrong, if I'm not back by 5, you send everything, all of Dexter's research, all of my documentation, all of it to every media outlet you can think of. Understood. This is a terrible plan, Zoe said. It's the only plan we've got. The afternoon dragged like pulling teeth. Aaliyah sat through history and chemistry in a fog, her mind racing through scenarios. What would Logan do? Would he try to intimidate her, threaten her physically? Or was this about something else entirely? At 3:45, she made her way to the student parking lot. The lake was a 10-minute walk through the woods, a scenic path that Westfield students used for everything from romantic hookups to illicit parties. It was also isolated away from cameras, away from witnesses, perfect for an ambush. She checked her phone one more time. No new messages from her father. She activated the audio recorder and started walking. The path through the woods was beautiful in that New England winter way. Bare branches against a pale sky, frost crunching under her shoes, the smell of pine and cold earth. Under different circumstances, it might have been peaceful. Now it felt like walking into a trap she couldn't spring. The lake appeared through the trees, its surface frozen and gray. The small parking lot was empty except for one car, Logan's cherry red Tesla with the vanity plates. Aaliyah's pulse kicked up, but she kept walking. The recorder was running. Her father was watching. She just had to stay calm, stay smart, and get what they needed. Logan was leaning against his car, checking his phone. When he heard her approach, he looked up and smiled. I honestly didn't think you'd come. Guess you're braver than you look. Or stupider, Aaliyah said. What do you want, Logan? Straight to business. I respect that. He pushed off the car. Here's the thing, Carter. You've become a problem. Not just for me, for this whole school. You're disrupting the natural order of things, making people uncomfortable, asking questions that don't need to be asked. Questions like why the mayor's son thinks he can terrorize anyone who doesn't worship him. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Logan's smile widened. That attitude, that constant need to make everything about race, about fairness, about justice. This isn't some after-school special, Carter. This is the real world. And in the real world, people like me succeed, and people like you learn their place. People like me, Aaliyah repeated flatly. You mean black people or poor people? Which one bothers you more? I mean people who don't understand how things work. My family built this town. My grandfather funded Westfield Academy. My father keeps the economy running. We're the reason this place exists. He took a step closer. You're a charity case, a diversity checkbox, and you should be grateful for the opportunity instead of biting the hand that feeds you. Aaliyah heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Ethan, Bryce, and Marcus emerging from the woods, cutting off her escape route. This is your last chance, Logan said quietly. Leave Westfield. Transfer schools. Disappear. Do that and we'll forget this ever happened. Your mom might even get her job back. We can make things easier for you. Or Aaliyah's voice was steady, even as adrenaline flooded her system. Or we make things so much worse that leaving is the best option you'll have left. Logan nodded to his friends. Show her what we mean. Ethan pulled out his phone and started playing a video. Aaliyah recognized their apartment building, recognized her mother walking to their car in her Uber vest. The video followed Diana for several blocks, zooming in on her license plate, showing her stopping at a red light. We know where she works, where she goes, who she talks to. Logan's voice was conversational, almost friendly. Accidents happen, Carter. People lose their jobs, their housing, their safety. All it takes is one phone call to the right people. You're threatening my mother. Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists. You're actually threatening my mother. I'm offering you a choice. A business transaction. You walk away quietly, and your mom stays safe. You keep fighting and... He shrugged. Well, we've already shown you what happens when you don't cooperate. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Logan, maybe you should shut up unless you want to be next. Logan snapped. He turned back to Aaliyah. What's it going to be? Aaliyah thought about her father's letter, about precision, about waiting for the right moment. This was it. This was Logan showing his hand, completely admitting to everything on record. No, she said clearly. My answer is no. I'm not leaving. I'm not backing down. And you're not going to get away with this. Logan's expression darkened. Wrong answer. He nodded to Ethan and Bryce, who started moving toward her. Aaliyah backed up, calculating distances, looking for escape routes. 4 against 1. No witnesses. In the woods. This was bad. Ethan reached for her arm, and Aaliyah twisted away years of self-defense classes her father had insisted on kicking in. She wasn't going down without a fight. Grab her, Logan ordered. We're just going to have a little talk. Very thorough, very persuasive. Bryce lunged, and Aaliyah dodged her backpack, swinging around and catching him in the face. He stumbled back, cursing. But there were too many of them, and they were bigger, stronger, closing in from all sides. This was it. This was where everything went wrong. Then a voice cut through the clearing like a knife. That's far enough. Everyone froze. Caleb Carter stepped out from the tree line, and Aaliyah had never been so relieved to see anyone in her entire life. He was dressed in dark tactical pants and a black jacket, and he moved with the fluid certainty of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. But it was his eyes that stopped everyone cold. They were the eyes of a predator who'd just found his prey. Who the hell are you? Logan demanded, trying to sound confident and failing. I'm the father. Caleb's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Aaliyah, come here, please. Aaliyah didn't hesitate. She moved toward her father, and the boys parted to let her pass. Something about Caleb's presence, his absolute calm, made even Logan reconsider the situation. When she reached him, Caleb positioned himself between Aaliyah and the 4 boys. You must be Logan Hastings. I've heard a lot about you. This is a private conversation. Logan said, some of his bravado returning. You're trespassing. So are you. This is public land. Caleb smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And I just heard you threaten my daughter and my wife. That's assault. Conspiracy to commit harm. Oh, and that video you showed of my wife? That's stalking. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. Caleb gestured to Aaliyah. My daughter's been recording this entire conversation. Every word, every threat. All of it admissible in court. Logan's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Aaliyah, play it back. Aaliyah pulled out her phone and replayed the last 2 minutes of audio. Logan's voice came through crystal clear. We know where she works, where she goes. Accidents happen, Carter. Bryce tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Caleb moved. 1 second, Caleb was standing still. The next, he was in Bryce's path, hand locking around the boy's wrist in a grip that made Bryce cry out. Caleb twisted, and Bryce went down to his knees. Nobody moves. Caleb said calmly, not even breathing hard. Nobody runs. You're going to stand there very quietly while I explain something important. He released Bryce, who scrambled back to the group, cradling his wrist. My name is Caleb Carter, Master Sergeant, United States Army Special Forces. 3 combat tours. 247 confirmed kills as a sniper. He let that sink in. I've spent the last 9 years hunting men who make you look like children playing dress-up. Men who thought they were untouchable. Men who learned very painfully that they were wrong. Logan tried to interrupt. You can't. I'm not finished. Caleb's voice didn't rise, but it cut Logan off like a physical blow. I could have you all on the ground in under 4 seconds. I could disable you permanently in 6. I could make it look like a training accident, and no one would ever question it, because I know people who make problems disappear. He stepped closer, and Logan actually flinched. But I'm not going to do any of that. You know why. Because my daughter believes in justice, not revenge. She believes in doing things the right way, even when the system is rigged against her. She's better than me in that regard. He glanced back at Aaliyah with unmistakable pride. So instead of ending you, I'm going to end your family's legacy, legally, publicly, completely. My father will destroy you, Logan said, voice shaking. He's the mayor. He has power. Your father has corruption masquerading as power. There's a difference. Caleb pulled out his phone. Right now, as we speak, I have copies of your father's financial records showing money laundering through the Hastings Foundation, evidence of bribes to school board members, tax evasion, connections to 3 separate police brutality cover-ups. And thanks to your little performance today, I now have you on tape admitting to stalking and threatening my family? He took another step forward, and his voice dropped to something darker. Your father built his empire on the backs of people he thought were too weak to fight back. But he made one critical mistake. He targeted my daughter. And I spent 9 years in places you can't pronounce learning exactly how to dismantle empires like his. Marcus spoke up suddenly, his voice cracking. I tried to tell him to stop. I tried to tell all of them this would go too far. Then you're going to help me. Caleb turned to Marcus. You're going to write a detailed statement about everything you've witnessed, every incident, every plan, every order Logan gave. You're going to do it tonight, and you're going to sign it in front of a notary. I can't. They'll what hurt you? Your family. Caleb's expression softened slightly. I'm offering you a chance to be on the right side of this, to protect yourself before the whole thing comes down. Because it is coming down, Marcus. The only question is whether you're buried in the rubble or standing outside watching it burn. Marcus looked at Logan, then back at Caleb. Finally, he nodded. You're all going to regret this, Logan said, but his voice had lost its edge. Your father is going to be arrested within the week. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit is very interested in what I've sent them. Caleb checked his watch. And in about 30 minutes, I have a meeting with your school's principal and board chairman. I'm going to give them one chance to expel you, and your friends implement real oversight and make this right. If they refuse, every major news outlet in the state will have this story by tomorrow morning, complete with video, audio, financial records, and a very photogenic victim who just wanted to get an education. He looked at each of the boys in turn. Go home. Tell your parents what you've done. Hire lawyers if you're smart. And pray that my daughter's faith in the justice system is stronger than my desire to handle this the way I was trained to. Logan opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, he had nothing to say. He walked back to his Tesla, and his friends followed. Marcus lingered for a moment, mouthing, "I'm sorry," to Aaliyah before leaving. When the car pulled away, Aaliyah finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking. You came. I told you I would. Caleb turned to her, his expression softening. You okay? Yeah, scared but okay. She looked up at him. Did you mean it? All that stuff about the FBI and the news outlets? Every word. I've been compiling evidence for days. Your documentation plus what I've gathered, it's enough to bring down everyone involved." He put his arm around her shoulders. "But the meeting with the principal and the board that's happening right now. I need to go. Are you good to get home?" "I'll call Mom. Tell her I'll be there tonight. This ends today, Princess. One way or another." He started to walk away, then paused. "And Aaliyah, I'm proud of you. You stood your ground when most people would have run. That takes courage." She watched him disappear into the woods, moving like smoke, like a ghost who'd learned to be solid only when it mattered. Aaliyah walked back to school on shaky legs, her mind reeling. She'd faced down her tormentors. Her father had shown them exactly who they were dealing with. Everything was about to change. She just hoped they were ready for the fallout. Back at Westfield Academy in Principal Whitmore's office, Caleb Carter sat across from three people who thought they held all the power in the room. Principal James Whitmore, 62, silver-haired and self-satisfied. Dean Patricia Reeves, the woman who dismissed Aaliyah's complaints. And Robert Kellerman, school board chairman, who'd made it clear the system protected its own. Caleb had played the wealthy parent perfectly during his tour, asking about programs, nodding approvingly, writing a check that made them practically salivate. Now sitting in the leather chair across from Whitmore's desk, he let the mask drop. "Thank you for meeting with me," he said. "I wanted to discuss the environment at Westfield before I commit to enrolling my daughter." "Of course," Whitmore said smoothly. "We pride ourselves on academic excellence and systematic harassment of minority students." Caleb dropped a folder on the desk, specifically a student named Aaliyah Carter. "I believe you know her." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Reeves leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, I'm not sure what you've heard, but I've heard everything. I've documented everything. And I've compiled enough evidence to bury this school, this board, and everyone who's covered up the abuse." He opened the folder. Financial records showing embezzlement of scholarship funds, evidence that the school board rigged admissions to favor donors' children, communication logs proving you knew about the harassment and chose to ignore it, and video of your students threatening violence against my daughter 40 minutes ago. Kellerman's face flushed red. "This is outrageous. You can't just walk in here and—" "I'm not walking in, I'm kicking down the door." Caleb's voice was ice. "You have 48 hours to expel Logan Hastings and his accomplices, issue a public apology to Aaliyah Carter, and implement third-party oversight of your harassment policies. If you don't, every piece of evidence I have goes to the State Attorney General, the FBI, and every news outlet from here to Boston." Whitmore tried to regain control. "Mr. Carter, you're clearly upset, but making threats—" "I don't make threats, I make promises." Caleb stood up. "Logan Hastings threatened my wife and daughter today, on camera, with witnesses. That's not he said, she said. That's actionable evidence, and the systematic cover-up of his behavior that makes you all accomplices." He walked to the door, then turned back. 48 hours. Choose wisely. Then he left, leaving three people who suddenly realized their fortress had cracks in the foundation. By the time Caleb made it to his truck, his phone was ringing. Unknown number. "Carter. This is Detective James Ross, Westfield PD. We need you to come to the station. There's been a complaint filed against you." Caleb closed his eyes. Of course, the Hastings family wasn't going to go down quietly. "What's the complaint?" "Assault on 4 minors. Threats of violence. The mayor's son is claiming you attacked him and his friends unprovoked." "That's interesting considering I have video evidence of them threatening my daughter." "Then you can explain that at the station. Are you coming voluntarily or do I need to send units?" Caleb looked at his phone at the files he'd compiled at the encrypted drive sitting in his glove compartment that contained everything he'd gathered. They were trying to neutralize him before he could deploy his evidence. Classic defensive move. Arrest the threat control, the narrative bury the truth under bureaucratic process. But Caleb Carter had spent 9 years planning for contingencies exactly like this. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "And detective, make sure you have good lawyers present. You're going to need them." He ended the call and immediately sent a message to Diana, getting arrested. framed. Don't panic. Everything is in motion. Give the backup drive to Dexter Williams. He knows what to do. Trust the plan. Love you both. Then he started the truck and drove toward the police station, toward the trap they'd set for him. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Caleb Carter had spent 9 years learning how to turn traps into weapons. And he was about to show them exactly what happened when you tried to cage a ghost who'd learned to weaponize his own death. The Westfield Police Department occupied a brick building that looked more like a suburban office complex than a place where justice supposedly happened. Caleb pulled into the parking lot at exactly 8:47 p.m., noting the 3 patrol cars positioned near the entrance, the security cameras covering every angle, and the way the building's lights cast shadows that could hide or reveal, depending on what you needed them to do. He'd walked into more dangerous situations with worse odds. But those had been enemy territory where the rules were clear. Here, the enemy wore badges and spoke the language of legitimacy while serving corruption. Detective James Ross met him at the entrance, a man in his mid-40s with tired eyes and the slouched posture of someone who'd stopped fighting the system years ago. He looked Caleb up and down, taking in the tactical bearing that no amount of civilian clothes could hide. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming in voluntarily. Did I have a choice?" "Everyone has choices." Ross held the door open. "This way." They walked through the station past deputies who watched with barely concealed interest. Caleb recognized the dynamic immediately. This wasn't routine. This was theater. Someone wanted him visible, wanted the optics of a dangerous man being brought to heel. The interrogation room was exactly what he expected. Gray walls, metal table, bolted to the floor mirror that was obviously one-way glass camera mounted in the corner. Ross gestured to a chair. "Have a seat. Can I get you anything, water, coffee?" "Answers," Caleb said, sitting. "What exactly am I being charged with?" Ross sat across from him and opened a folder. "Logan Hastings, along with 3 other students, filed a complaint alleging that you assaulted them at approximately 4:15 p.m. today, near the lake on the Westfield Academy grounds. They claim you attacked them without provocation, threatened their lives, and made verbal statements indicating intent to harm the mayor and school administration." Caleb listened without expression. "That's creative. What evidence do they have?" "Bruising on one boy's wrist consistent with forceful restraint. Witness statements from all 4 boys corroborating the incident. And your own admission to the school principal that you made threats regarding exposure of alleged wrongdoing." Alleged wrongdoing. Caleb smiled without humor. "That's an interesting way to describe systematic harassment, stalking, and conspiracy to harm." Ross leaned forward. "Look, Mr. Carter, I've read your file. Army Special Forces, multiple deployments, exemplary service record. I respect that. But you can't just come back to civilian life and handle things the way you did over there. We have laws here. Processes. You threatened minors. I protected my daughter from minors who were about to assault her." Caleb pulled out his phone, but Ross immediately held up a hand. "I'm going to need you to put that away. This is an official interview. This is an official recording." Caleb set the phone on the table screen facing up. "Of Logan Hastings threatening my wife and daughter. Of him admitting to stalking my family. Of him ordering his friends to physically restrain my daughter in an isolated location. That's assault, battery, stalking, and conspiracy. Would you like to hear it?" Ross's expression flickered just for a second, but Caleb caught it. Uncertainty. The detective hadn't expected evidence. He'd expected a routine intimidation session that would end with Caleb backing down or getting arrested. Classic small-town power play. "That recording may not be admissible," Ross said carefully. "If it was obtained without consent." "My daughter was one party to the conversation. Single-party consent is legal in this state. The recording is admissible." Caleb pressed play. Logan's voice filled the small room, crystal clear and damning. "We know where she works, where she goes. Accidents happen, Carter. People lose their jobs, their housing, Their safety. Ross went pale. He held up a hand to stop the recording. Okay, that complicates things. No, detective, that simplifies things. Your mayor's son committed multiple felonies today, and instead of investigating him, you're sitting here trying to intimidate his victim's father into silence. Caleb leaned forward. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to take my statement. You're going to listen to this recording in its entirety. And then you're going to make a choice about which side of history you want to be on. It's not that simple. Mayor Hastings has influence. Mayor Hastings is going to be in federal custody by the end of the week. Caleb pulled out a small USB drive and set it on the table. That contains financial records showing money laundering through the Hastings Foundation, evidence of bribes to school board members, tax evasion documents, connections between the mayor's office and 3 separate police brutality cover-ups that your department swept under the rug. Ross stared at the drive like it was a live grenade. Where did you get this? People who believe in actual justice. People who've been waiting for someone with nothing to lose to finally blow the lid off this corrupt little empire. Caleb stood up. Now, am I under arrest, or am I free to go? The door opened before Ross could answer. Captain Marcus Webb, no relation to Marcus the student Caleb noted, entered with 2 officers. He was a large man with silver hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. Mr. Carter, you're under arrest for assault, terroristic threats, and intimidation of witnesses. On whose authority? Caleb didn't resist as the officers moved to cuff him. Mine, and the mayor's. Webb's smile was all venom. You think you can come into our town, threaten our citizens, and walk away? You're going to learn real fast that this isn't some third world country where you can do whatever you want. Caleb let them cuff him, noting that they were rougher than necessary. Performance again, making a point. But as they led him toward the holding cells, he met Ross's eyes and saw something the detective probably thought he was hiding. Shame. And the first flicker of doubt. The message had been delivered. The seed had been planted. Now it just needed time to grow. 20 minutes after Caleb's arrest, Aaliyah Carter stood in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, clutching the backup drive her husband had told her about in his text. Aaliyah stood beside her, both of them still processing what was happening. They arrested him, Diana said, for the 3rd time, her voice hollow. They actually arrested him for protecting you. He knew they would. Aaliyah's phone buzzed with another text from Zoe asking for updates. Mom, Dad said to give the drive to Dexter. That means he has a plan. We need to trust him. A beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the lot, and Dexter Williams jumped out with Zoe Chen right behind him. They rushed over, both looking wired on adrenaline and fear. We came as soon as we got your message, Dexter said. Your dad really got arrested. Diana nodded, holding out the drive. He said you'd know what to do with this. Dexter took it reverently, turning it over in his hands. This is it. Everything he collected. Everything. Financial records, communication logs, evidence of corruption going back years. Aaliyah grabbed Dexter's arm. He said to deploy it if he got arrested. They're trying to silence him, which means we need to make sure everyone hears what he found. Zoe was already pulling out her laptop. We go to my house. My parents are at a conference in Boston until tomorrow. We have time and privacy, and I have connections. What kind of connections? Diana asked. The kind that can make something go viral before anyone knows what hit them. Zoe's smile was fierce. I've been building a following on social media for months, art activism calling out injustice. I have 17,000 followers across platforms. If we do this right, if we tell the story the way it needs to be told, the Westfield Truth Project doesn't just expose corruption, it becomes a movement. They piled into Zoe's car, Diana sitting in the back with Aaliyah holding her daughter's hand like she was afraid to let go. The drive to Zoe's house took 15 minutes through quiet suburban streets that looked peaceful in the December night. No one would guess that beneath the surface, a war was being waged. Zoe's house was a modern split level with an art studio in the basement. Her mother was a graphic designer. Her father taught film studies at the state university. The studio was perfect for what they needed: multiple computers, high-speed internet, professional editing equipment, and soundproofing that would keep their work hidden. Dexter plugged the drive into Zoe's main computer and started navigating through files. His eyes went wide as he scrolled. "Oh my God, your dad didn't just collect evidence. He built an entire case. Look at this: financial statements with highlighted sections showing discrepancies. Phone records with annotations explaining who was calling who and why. Video footage with timestamps and context. This is prosecutorial-level work." "He spent 9 years in intelligence operations," Aaliyah said quietly. "He knows how to build an airtight case." Diana was reading over Dexter's shoulder and her hand flew to her mouth. "There's evidence here of corruption in the police department. Payoffs to Captain Webb. Cover-ups of excessive force complaints. Caleb marked it: all dates, amounts, names. Your husband is either the bravest man I've ever heard of or completely insane," Zoe said. "This doesn't just take down the Hastings family. This takes down half the power structure in this town." "That's the point," Aaliyah said. "It's not enough to stop Logan. We have to dismantle the system that created him and protected him. Otherwise, it just happens again to someone else." Dexter pulled up the Westfield Truth Project documentation that Aaliyah had compiled over months. "Okay, here's what we do. We combine your father's evidence with your documentation. We create a website: professional, organized, undeniable. Every incident of harassment, every financial crime, every abuse of power, all laid out in chronological order with supporting evidence." "Like a prosecutor's opening statement?" Diana said. "Exactly. But we don't just put it online and hope people find it. We launch it as a coordinated campaign." Zoe was already typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'll create a video, short, powerful, emotional. Aaliyah tells her story. We overlay it with evidence. We end with a call to action. Share this, demand justice, prove that no one is above the law." "How long will that take?" Aaliyah asked. "If we work through the night, we can have it ready to launch by morning." Zoe looked at Diana. "Mrs. Carter, I need your permission. This is going to make your family's story very public. There's going to be backlash. Media attention. People are going to take sides, and some of those people will be vicious. Are you prepared for that?" Diana looked at her daughter, then at the evidence on the screen. Years of corruption, of families destroyed, of justice perverted. She thought about Caleb sitting in a cell for the crime of protecting his child. She thought about every time she'd been told to be quiet, to accept her place, to stop making trouble. "Do it," she said. "All of it. If my husband is willing to sacrifice his freedom for this, the least I can do is be brave enough to stand beside him." They worked through the night like they were preparing for battle, because they were. Dexter organized the evidence into categories: financial crimes, abuse of power, systematic harassment, police corruption. He created a spreadsheet with names, dates, and corresponding evidence, each entry hyperlinked to its supporting document. Zoe filmed Aaliyah telling her story, starting with that first day at Westfield Academy, and ending with today's confrontation at the lake. The raw footage was heartbreaking. A 17-year-old girl who'd done everything right, who'd tried to follow the rules, who'd documented everything, because she'd been raised to believe the system would eventually listen. Zoe edited it down to 8 minutes of devastating testimony, interspersed with screenshots, audio clips, and official documents that proved every word. Diana made coffee and ordered food, kept them fed, and focused occasionally, reading through evidence and finding new connections that Dexter immediately added to the case file. She found her husband's notes in the margins of documents, precise clinical observations about corruption patterns, about how power protects itself, about the systemic nature of the abuse they'd suffered. By 4 a.m., they had a website. Clean, professional, impossible to dismiss as conspiracy or vendetta. The homepage featured Aaliyah's photo from her Westfield Academy student ID, young, bright-eyed, the image of everything the school was supposed to represent. Below it, a simple statement: This is what happens when power thinks it's untouchable. The site was organized into sections: the harassment, the cover-up, the corruption, the evidence. Each section built on the last, creating an undeniable narrative of systematic abuse. At the bottom, a call to action: share this, demand accountability, prove that justice isn't just for the powerful. Zoe uploaded the video to every platform she had access to: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. She crafted different versions for each platform, optimizing for algorithms and attention spans. She scheduled the posts to go live simultaneously at 7 a.m., timed to catch the morning news cycle. "One more thing," Dexter said, pulling up an email draft. "We need to send this to journalists, real ones. People who won't be intimidated by the Hastings family name." He'd already compiled a list: the Boston Globe's investigative team, the State Attorney General's Public Corruption Division, the FBI's Civil Rights Office, national news outlets that specialized in exposing systematic abuse. The email was short and professional, with the website link and a simple message: "This is what corruption looks like when the victims refuse to stay silent." At 6:55 a.m., they gathered around Zoe's computer, watching the clock tick down. Diana stood behind Aaliyah's chair, hands on her daughter's shoulders. Dexter's finger hovered over the enter key that would send the emails. Zoe's hand was on the mouse, ready to click publish. "Once we do this, there's no taking it back," Zoe said quietly. "The Hastings family will come after all of us. The school will retaliate. People we thought were friends might turn on us." "Good," Aaliyah said. "Let them show who they really are. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being small. My father spent 9 years in the shadows protecting us. Now it's our turn to fight for him." The clock hit 7:00 a.m. "For justice," Dexter said, and pressed send. "For truth," Zoe added, and clicked publish. The Westfield Truth Project went live. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The posts appeared on social media, the website loaded, the emails delivered. It felt anticlimactic, like screaming into the void. Then Zoe's phone buzzed. A notification. Someone had shared the video. Then another notification. And another. Within 10 minutes, the shares were coming faster than they could count. 20 shares became 50. 50 became 200. 200 became 1,000. The algorithm had picked it up. The video was spreading. At 7:23 a.m., a journalist from the Boston Globe replied to the email: "Just reviewed your evidence. Preparing story for tomorrow's edition. Can we interview Aaliyah Carter?" At 7:35 a.m., the State Attorney General's office called Diana's phone. "We've received your submission regarding corruption in Westfield. We're opening an investigation." At 7:42 a.m., Aaliyah's video had been viewed 50,000 times. At 8:00 a.m., Logan Hastings woke up to find his name trending on Twitter, and not in a good way. Mayor Richard Hastings was in his downtown office when his assistant burst through the door without knocking, her face pale and panicked. "Sir, you need to see this, right now." He looked up from his coffee, annoyed at the interruption. "What's so important that—" She turned her tablet to face him, showing Aaliyah's video. The girl he'd dismissed as a problem that could be handled quietly was staring into the camera, her voice steady and damning, telling a story that he'd thought was buried. Behind her, screenshots appeared showing bank transfers with his signature emails between him and board members, evidence of systematic corruption that he'd believed was untraceable. The mayor's coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Neither he nor his assistant noticed. "How many people have seen this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "As of right now, over 100,000 and climbing fast. The news outlets are calling. The Attorney General's office sent us a formal notice of investigation." She was crying now. "Sir, what do we do?" "Richard?" Hastings stared at the screen, at this girl he'd tried to erase, at the evidence his own arrogance had left behind. He thought about his son, about the empire he'd built, about the life he'd carefully constructed on a foundation of corruption and intimidation. And he realized with absolute certainty that it was all about to come crashing down. At the police station, Detective Ross arrived for his morning shift to find Captain Webb screaming into his phone, his face purple with rage. Officers clustered around computers watching Aaliyah's video, reading through the evidence, their expressions ranging from shock to horror to grim satisfaction. Ross pulled up the Westfield Truth Project on his own phone and felt something shift in his chest. This was it. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, without realizing it, the moment when staying quiet became more dangerous than speaking up. He walked to the holding cells where Caleb Carter sat on a metal bench looking calm despite spending the night in jail. When Caleb saw him, he smiled slightly. "Detective, come to process my release." "How did you know this would work?" Ross asked quietly. "How did you know people would care?" "Because everyone has a breaking point," Caleb said. "A moment when they realize that protecting corruption makes them complicit. You just hit yours." He stood up and walked to the cell bars. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ross looked at this man, this soldier who'd sacrificed everything to protect his family, who'd spent 9 years becoming a weapon so precise that he could dismantle an empire without firing a single shot. He thought about his own daughter, about the world he wanted her to inherit, about the kind of man he wanted to be. He pulled out his keys and unlocked the cell. "Captain Webb is going to fight this. So will the mayor. They have lawyers' connections power." "They had power," Caleb corrected, walking out of the cell. "Past tense. They just don't know it yet. But you do." He extended his hand. "Help me finish this. Testify to what you've seen. Provide the internal documents that prove the department knew about the corruption. Be on the right side when this ends." Ross stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he shook it. "I'll need protection. Witness protection, probably. They'll come after me." "The FBI will handle it. They're probably already drafting warrants." Caleb's grip was firm, steady. "You're doing the right thing." "Doesn't make it less terrifying." "Nothing worth doing ever is." By noon, the Westfield Truth Project had been viewed over 1 million times. National news outlets were running segments. The hashtag #StandWithAliyah was trending worldwide. Celebrities were sharing the video. Politicians were calling for investigations. The state attorney general announced a full review of Westfield's local government. In Principal Whitmore's office, the phone rang constantly with angry parents, concerned board members, and reporters demanding statements. Whitmore sat at his desk, head in his hands, realizing that 48 hours had come and gone, and he'd made the wrong choice. Dean Reeves had locked herself in her office, refusing to answer calls or emails. Robert Kellerman was meeting with lawyers who were already telling him that the evidence was too strong, too public, too damning to fight. At Westfield Academy, students gathered in the halls and classrooms watching Aaliyah's video on their phones. Some were shocked. Some were defensive. But most were starting to ask questions they'd never thought to ask before. How many other students had been silenced? How long had this been going on? Why hadn't anyone stopped it? Marcus Webb found Zoe in the library, his face tear-streaked and desperate. "I wrote the statement. Everything I saw, everything Logan did. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm so sorry. I should have been brave like Aaliyah." Zoe looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Send it to the email on the website. It's not too late to do the right thing." Ethan Park's father, upon seeing the video and recognizing his son in the background of several incidents, marched his son down to the police station and demanded he be arrested. "I didn't raise a monster," he told the officers, his voice breaking. "But I raised a boy who stood by and watched. That's almost worse." Bryce Kellerman's grandfather, the board chairman, tried to protect his grandson, but the lawyers were clear the evidence was overwhelming. The best they could hope for was a plea deal and a chance to avoid prison time in exchange for testimony against the others. By evening, the FBI had issued arrest warrants for Mayor Richard Hastings, Captain Marcus Webb, and 3 school board members. The charges ranged from money laundering and tax evasion to conspiracy to violate civil rights. Caleb stood outside the police station with Diana and Aaliyah, watching the news vans arrive, the reporters scrambling for statements, the machinery of justice finally grinding into motion. "It's really happening," Aaliyah whispered. "They're actually being held accountable." "The system doesn't fix itself," Caleb said quietly. "But sometimes, if you apply enough pressure in exactly the right places, you can make it work the way it was supposed to. Your documentation, your courage, your refusal to be silent. That's what did this, princess. Not me. You." Diana leaned against her husband, exhausted and relieved and terrified all at once. "What happens now? Now we survive the backlash. Because there will be one. People who benefited from the old system will fight to protect it. The trial will be ugly. The media attention will be invasive. It's going to get worse before it gets better." "But it will get better?" Aaliyah asked. Caleb looked at his daughter, this brilliant, brave young woman who'd fought a war she shouldn't have had to fight, and smiled. "Yeah, baby girl, it will get better. Because you didn't just expose corruption. You showed everyone watching that one person refusing to be silent can change everything. That truth is more powerful than privilege. That justice might be slow, but it's worth fighting for." A reporter spotted them and started shouting questions. Others followed. Within seconds, they were surrounded by cameras and microphones, everyone wanting the story, the statement, the moment. Caleb stepped in front of his family, shielding them, about to say they had no comment. But Aaliyah touched his arm, stopping him. "I've got this," she said. She stepped forward into the lights, into the cameras, into the moment she'd been preparing for without knowing it. And when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, and absolutely unafraid. "My name is Aaliyah Carter, and I'm a student at Westfield Academy. For months, I was harassed, threatened, and targeted because I didn't fit into the system that was designed to protect privilege and silence dissent. Today, that system is being held accountable. Not because of me alone, but because of every person who refused to look away, who chose truth over comfort, who believed that justice matters more than power." She paused, and in that moment, she looked exactly like her father, calm, precise, absolutely certain. "This isn't just about Westfield. It's about every school, every institution, every place where people in power think they can abuse that power without consequences. Today we proved them wrong, and we're going to keep proving them wrong until justice isn't just a word we say in the Pledge of Allegiance, until it's something we actually live." The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted more questions. But Aaliyah had said what she needed to say. She turned back to her parents, and together the Carter family walked away from the circus, toward whatever came next. Behind them, the empire burned. And from the ashes, something better would grow. Or at least they had to believe it would. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The arrests happened fast, like dominoes falling in sequence. Mayor Richard Hastings was taken into custody at 6 a.m. 2 days after the Westfield Truth Project went viral. FBI agents arriving at his colonial-style mansion, while news helicopters circled overhead. The footage played on every major network, the mayor in handcuffs, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, his expression shifting from outrage to fear as agents led him to a waiting vehicle. Captain Marcus Webb tried to run. He made it as far as the Massachusetts border before state police pulled him over. The body camera footage showed him crying, begging, insisting he was just following orders. Nobody cared. The evidence was too clear, the corruption too deep. Robert Kellerman, the school board chairman, suffered a heart attack the morning federal marshals arrived with a warrant. He survived, but the stress aged him a decade overnight. His lawyers negotiated a plea deal that would see him testify against the others in exchange for reduced charges. His grandson Bryce, facing assault and conspiracy charges, broke down completely and gave investigators everything they wanted. Logan Hastings. The golden boy who'd thought himself untouchable watched his world collapse from his family's living room. His mother had stopped speaking to him. His father was facing 20 years in federal prison. His friends had all turned witness against him to save themselves. And every time he checked social media, he saw Aaliyah Carter's face, her voice, her story. Over 5 million views, now shared by people in every state, in countries he'd never even heard of. He'd wanted to make her disappear. Instead, he'd made her immortal. The preliminary hearing was held 3 weeks later in federal court, and the building was surrounded by protesters. Some held signs supporting the Hastings family, innocent until proven guilty. Leave our mayor alone. But they were vastly outnumbered by others carrying signs that read, "Justice for Aaliyah," "No one above the law," and simply, "Truth wins." Aaliyah sat in the courtroom between her parents, holding her mother's hand, and watching as lawyers presented evidence that she'd helped compile. Every document, every recording, every piece of the puzzle she'd carefully assembled over months. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Jennifer Martinez, who'd made a career of taking down public corruption, and she wielded the evidence like a surgeon wielding a scalpel. "This isn't about teenage drama," Martinez said in her opening statement, her voice filling the courtroom. "This is about a systematic abuse of power, about institutions designed to protect children, instead protecting privilege. About a family that believed their money and influence put them above the law. Today, we prove they were wrong." She presented the audio recording of Logan threatening Aaliyah and Diana. She showed financial records proving the mayor had embezzled scholarship funds. She displayed emails between school board members discussing how to silence the Carter family. She brought in Marcus Webb, who testified through tears about how he'd watched Logan and the others harass Aaliyah for months, while he said nothing because he was afraid. "I was a coward," Marcus told the court, his voice breaking. "I saw what they were doing. I knew it was wrong. But I convinced myself it wasn't my problem, that speaking up would only make me a target too. I chose my comfort over her safety, and I'll have to live with that forever." Detective James Ross testified about the culture of corruption in the police department, about how complaints against powerful families disappeared, about how Captain Webb had explicitly ordered him not to investigate the Carter family's break-in because the mayor wants this handled quietly. "I was afraid for my job, for my pension, for my family," Ross said, looking directly at Aaliyah. "But watching that young woman refuse to be silenced, watching her risk everything for truth, it made me ashamed of my own cowardice. I'm here today because she showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite the fear." The defense tried to paint Caleb as a dangerous vigilante, a trained killer who'd intimidated teenage boys. But when the prosecution played the full recording from the lake, when the jury heard Logan ordering his friends to grab Aaliyah, heard him threatening her mother, the defense's argument crumbled. Caleb took the stand on the 4th day, wearing a suit that Diana had bought him, the first new clothes he'd owned in years. He answered questions with military precision, never volunteering more than asked, his demeanor calm and professional. "Did you threaten those boys?" the defense attorney demanded. "I informed them of the consequences of their actions," Caleb replied evenly. "I explained that threatening my family was a federal crime. I detailed my qualifications to make clear that I was neither intimidated by them nor afraid of their father's influence. And I offered them a choice: face legal consequences or face worse." That sounds like a threat. That sounds like giving criminals an opportunity to surrender peacefully, something I did hundreds of times in my military career. Caleb looked at the jury. The difference is that in war zones, people understood that actions have consequences. Here, these boys had been taught that their actions had no consequences. I corrected that misunderstanding. The courtroom erupted in scattered applause. The judge gavelled for order, but even she was trying not to smile. When it was Aaliyah's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high, the same girl who'd walked through Westfield's gates on that first September morning, but different now. Stronger. Unbowed. The prosecutor asked her to describe her experience at Westfield Academy, And Aaliyah told her story without tears, without anger, just clear-eyed honesty about what she'd endured and why she'd refused to give up. "I kept documentation because my father taught me that truth without evidence is just opinion," she said. "I stayed at Westfield even when it would have been easier to leave because I knew if I ran, they'd just find another target. And I released the Westfield Truth Project because silence protects abusers. Always. Without exception." The defense attorney tried to shake her on cross-examination, suggesting she'd exaggerated the harassment, that she'd been oversensitive, that she'd weaponized her race to gain sympathy. Aaliyah looked at him with something close to pity. "Sir, I documented everything, because I knew people would say exactly what you're saying right now. That I'm lying. That I'm exaggerating. That somehow being targeted for who I am is my fault. But the evidence doesn't lie. The recordings don't lie. And the fact that you're more concerned with defending the people who tried to destroy me than asking why they felt entitled to do it tells me everything I need to know about your priorities." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the verdicts came rapid fire: guilty, guilty, guilty on all major counts. Mayor Richard Hastings would face 22 years in federal prison. Captain Webb got 15. The school board members received varying sentences based on their level of involvement. Logan Hastings, tried as an adult due to the severity of his crimes, was sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile facility, followed by probation and mandatory community service. As the judge read the sentences, Aaliyah felt Caleb's hand on her shoulder and Diana's arm around her waist. They stood together, a family that had been broken and rebuilt, watching justice actually happen. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them again, but this time, Aaliyah was ready. She'd written a statement with Zoe's help, practicing it until every word felt right. "Today the system worked the way it's supposed to," she said into the cameras. "Not because it wanted to, but because people forced it to. Because victims refused to be silent. Because witnesses chose courage over comfort. Because evidence mattered more than influence." She paused, gathering herself. "But this can't be a one-time thing. This can't be the exception. Every person watching this who's ever been bullied, harassed, or told to stay quiet, your story matters. Your truth matters. And if we all refuse to be silent, if we all demand accountability, we can build a world where what happened to me never happens again." The reforms at Westfield Academy started within a week of the verdict. The entire school board resigned. Principal Whitmore took early retirement, some called it that, but everyone knew he'd been forced out. Dean Reeves was fired for gross negligence in handling harassment complaints. The state appointed an interim administration with a clear mandate: rebuild from the ground up. The new principal was Dr. Sarah Chen, Zoe's aunt, a former superintendent from Boston, known for her zero-tolerance policy on bullying and her commitment to equity. Her first act was to invite Aaliyah, Zoe, and Dexter to meet with her in an office that still smelled like Whitmore's expensive cologne. "I've read everything," Dr. Chen said, gesturing to a stack of folders on her desk, the Westfield Truth Project printed and organized. "Every incident you documented, every failure of leadership, every moment this institution chose power over students. It's unconscionable. And it ends now." She laid out her vision: mandatory anti-harassment training for all students and faculty, an independent oversight committee with student representation, a confidential reporting system that bypassed school administration and went directly to the oversight board, and most importantly, a student-led ethics council with real power to investigate complaints and recommend consequences. "I want you three to lead it," Dr. Chen said, looking at Aaliyah. "You've already proven you know how to document abuse, build cases, and demand accountability. Now I'm giving you institutional power to do it. What do you say?" Aaliyah exchanged glances with Zoe and Dexter. 6 months ago, they'd been outsiders fighting a system designed to crush them. Now they were being asked to rebuild that system from within. "We want full transparency," Aaliyah said. "Meeting minutes published online. Decision-making processes visible to everyone. No closed-door deals, no protecting powerful families because they donate money. Done. We want protection for whistleblowers. Anyone who reports harassment gets immunity from retaliation enforced by the Oversight Committee. Agreed. And we want demographic data published annually. How many harassment complaints? What percentage involves students of color? What's the resolution rate? Make it impossible to hide patterns. Dr. Chen smiled. You've thought about this. We've had months to think about it, Dexter said, while we were fighting for our survival. Then let's make sure no one else has to fight the way you did. Dr. Chen extended her hand. Welcome to the new Westfield Academy. Let's build something worth being proud of. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There was resistance: parents who thought the new policies were too strict, students who resented losing their privileged donors, who threatened to pull funding if the school became too political. But Dr. Chen held firm, and slowly, the culture began to shift. The Ethics Council's first case involved a senior who'd been sexually harassing a sophomore. Under the old system, it would have been swept under the rug. The senior's father was a major donor. Under the new system, the council investigated, found overwhelming evidence, and recommended expulsion. Dr. Chen upheld the recommendation. The father threatened to sue. Dr. Chen released the evidence publicly. The father withdrew his son and his donations. The school survived just fine without both. Word spread fast. Westfield was different now. Accountability was real. Students started coming forward with complaints they'd buried for years. The Ethics Council handled each one with the same methodical precision Aaliyah had learned from her father document. Everything follow the evidence, let the truth speak for itself. Detective Ross, true to his word, had testified against his former captain and provided internal documents proving systematic corruption. The state attorney general's office had offered him witness protection, but Ross had declined. Instead, he'd applied to be Westfield's new police chief, arguing that the town needed leadership from someone who understood how corruption had taken root and was committed to preventing it from growing back. The town council, newly elected after half the old guard had been swept out in emergency elections, hired him. His first act was to fire every officer who'd been complicit in the cover-ups. His second was to implement body cameras, civilian oversight, and community policing initiatives. His third was to visit Aaliyah at school. I wanted to apologize properly, Ross said, standing in Dr. Chen's office while Aaliyah sat at the conference table, reviewing Ethics Council cases. What I didn't do when you and your mother needed help. There's no excuse for it. You did the right thing eventually, Aaliyah said. That counts for something. It counts for less than doing the right thing the first time. Ross shifted uncomfortably. I also wanted you to know that we're investigating every complaint your Truth Project surfaced, not just the ones involving the Hastings family. Every case of police misconduct, every time we failed someone. We're going back 5 years and we're making it right. That's going to take a while. Good, it should. What we did, what we let happen, it wasn't something that occurred overnight. Fixing it won't be either. He handed her a card with his direct number. If you or anyone on your Ethics Council ever needs police support, you call me directly. No more going through channels, no more bureaucracy. Student safety is my top priority now. After he left, Zoe looked up from her laptop where she'd been designing posters for the Ethics Council's awareness campaign. Think he means it? Yeah, Aaliyah said. I think he does. People don't throw away 20-year careers unless they actually believe in what they're doing. People surprise you sometimes, Dexter added, not looking up from the spreadsheet he was building to track complaint resolution times. Not always in bad ways. Winter turned to spring and spring to summer. The Carter family moved out of their cramped apartment into a modest house on the north side, funded partly by Diana's new job as a nursing supervisor at a hospital in the next town over, and partly by the settlement Westfield Academy had paid to avoid a civil lawsuit. The house had a yard, a porch, and enough space for Aaliyah to finally have her own room. Caleb found work as a security consultant, helping organizations identify vulnerabilities in their systems. It was good work, honest work, and it let him use his skills without leaving the country. But more importantly, it let him be home for dinner every night, let him watch his daughter grow into the leader she was always meant to be. On weekends, he taught self-defense classes at the community center, free to anyone who wanted to learn, but focused especially on girls and women who'd been taught their whole lives that they weren't strong enough to protect themselves. Strength isn't about muscles, he told his students, demonstrating a technique to break a wrist lock. It's about refusing to accept that you're powerless. It's about knowing that you have value, and anyone who tries to take that from you is the one with the problem, not you. Diana watched from the doorway, sometimes arms crossed, smiling at this man who'd spent 9 years becoming a weapon and was now teaching people how to defend themselves without becoming weapons in turn. He'd changed during those lost years, become harder, colder in some ways. But being home, being a father and husband again, was slowly thawing those frozen places. One Saturday in August, she found him on their back porch, staring at the sunset with a beer in his hand and something heavy in his expression. "What's on your mind?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Regret," he said simply. 9 years die. 9 years I can't get back. 9 years Aaliyah grew up without me. 9 years you carried everything alone. You were protecting us. I was running." He looked at her, and his eyes were raw. "I told myself it was about keeping you safe, but part of it was cowardice. I was afraid that if I came back I'd bring my demons with me, that I'd hurt you both just by being near you." Diana took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "And did you bring demons?" "Yeah, but I also brought justice. And I learned something." He squeezed her hand. "You can't run from yourself. You can only choose what you do with who you've become. I became a weapon, but I got to choose what I aimed at. You aimed at people who hurt our daughter. I'd say that's a pretty good choice." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere inside, Aaliyah was on a video call with Zoe and Dexter, planning the Ethics Council's initiatives for the upcoming school year. Her laughter drifted through the open window, and both parents smiled at the sound. "She's going to be valedictorian," Diana said. "Dr. Chen told me last week. Highest GPA in the senior class." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Of course she is. She's brilliant. She's going to apply to Harvard, Princeton, Yale. She's going to leave Westfield and do amazing things." Diana's voice wavered slightly. "And I'm terrified." "Of what?" "That we won't have prepared her enough. That the world will try to break her the way Westfield tried to. That we won't be there to protect her." Caleb pulled his wife close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "We raised her to protect herself. To document everything, to demand accountability, to never accept that she's powerless. She doesn't need us to fight her battles. She just needs to know we're in her corner when the fights get hard." Is that enough? It'll have to be. Because that's all parents can ever give their kids: tools and love, and the certainty that they're not alone. He kissed the top of Diana's head. "She's going to change the world, Di, just like she changed Westfield. She learned from the best." "No," Caleb said quietly. "She learned from you. I taught her tactics. You taught her heart." The months blurred into a new school year. Aaliyah's senior year at Westfield Academy was nothing like her first. She walked through those Gothic gates, without fear, surrounded by friends who'd stood with her, protected by systems she'd helped build. The new students looked at her with respect. Sometimes awe. She was the girl who'd taken down a corrupt empire, who'd proven that truth mattered more than power. But Aaliyah never let it go to her head. She showed up to ethics council meetings prepared and focused. She tutored underclassmen struggling with coursework. She volunteered at the community center her father had helped establish. She was just a student, trying to make her corner of the world a little better, a little fairer, a little more just. College acceptance letters arrived in March. Harvard, Princeton, Yale all accepted her. But it was Georgetown that made her cry, their letter specifically mentioning the Westfield Truth Project and offering her a full scholarship to study public policy. "We need more leaders like you," the Dean of Admissions wrote. "People who understand that democracy requires constant vigilance, that justice is something we build rather than inherit. We'd be honored to help you develop the skills to do it on a national scale." She called Zoe and Dexter immediately. "I'm going to Georgetown." "We know," Zoe said. "Dexter got into MIT for computer science. I got into RISD for graphic design. We're all getting out." "And we're all coming back," Dexter added. "Summers at minimum. The Ethics Council will need oversight. The reforms need protecting. We started this work. We don't get to just abandon it." "Deal," Aaliyah said. 4 years from now, we come back and make sure Westfield stays Westfield 2.0, not Westfield Classic." It's a date. Graduation day arrived in June, perfect and bittersweet the way endings always are. Westfield Academy's quad was transformed with white chairs, a temporary stage, flowers everywhere. Families gathered, cameras ready, everyone dressed in their finest. Aaliyah stood backstage in her cap and gown, valedictorian cords around her neck, heart pounding as she reviewed her speech one final time. Dr. Chen found her there smiling with unmistakable pride. "Nervous?" the principal asked. "Terrified," Aaliyah admitted. "Good. The best speeches come from people brave enough to be scared." Dr. Chen squeezed her shoulder. "What you did this year, what you've built, it's going to outlast all of us. Students 10 years from now will benefit from the systems you created. That's legacy, Aaliyah. Real lasting change." "I just wanted to survive high school." "You did more than survive. You transformed it." Dr. Chen's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Now go tell them how." The ceremony began with the usual pomp: the national anthem, the school song, the introduction of the board and faculty. Then Dr. Chen stepped to the podium and introduced the valedictorian. Aaliyah Carter came to Westfield Academy as a scholarship student with dreams of academic excellence. What she got instead was a masterclass in institutional failure, in how systems protect power at the expense of people. A lesser person would have broken. Aaliyah built a movement. "Ladies and gentlemen, your valedictorian." Aaliyah walked to the podium on shaking legs, looking out at hundreds of faces. She found her parents in the crowd, Diana dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, Caleb sitting ramrod straight in his suit, pride radiating from him like heat. She found Zoe and Dexter in the front row of students, both grinning and giving her thumbs up. She found Marcus Webb sitting with his family, who nodded at her with respect she'd never seen from him before. She took a breath and began. "Principal Chen, faculty, honored guests, parents and fellow graduates, I'm supposed to stand here and tell you that these were the best 4 years of our lives. I'm supposed to talk about memories we'll cherish, friendships that will last forever, lessons that prepared us for the future. And for some of you, that's true. For me, Westfield Academy was a war zone. I spent most of my time here just trying to survive people who thought my existence was a threat to theirs." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the speech they'd expected. Aaliyah pressed on. "But here's what I learned in that war zone. Real power isn't inherited. It's not bought with money or protected by family names or granted through privilege. Real power is earned by choosing justice over silence, by documenting truth even when no one wants to hear it, by standing up even when you're standing alone." She looked directly at her father, who was openly crying, now tears streaming down his face. "My father taught me that the battlefield isn't always where you think it is. Sometimes it's a school hallway. Sometimes it's an administrator's office. Sometimes it's the moment you decide whether to stay silent or speak up. He taught me to be prepared, to be precise, to wait for the right moment. But my mother taught me something equally important: to never lose sight of why you're fighting. To remember that justice without compassion is just revenge. That the goal isn't to destroy your enemies, but to build systems where no one needs to be enemies in the first place." Scattered applause began building into a wave that swept through the crowd. This year Westfield changed, not because people in power wanted it to, but because students demanded it. Because allies chose courage over comfort. Because adults finally listened to young people saying something was broken. And now we have ethics councils with real power. We have oversight that's actually independent. We have transparency that makes hiding corruption impossible. We have a school that's finally starting to live up to the values it claims to represent. She paused, gathering herself for the final push. To my fellow graduates, especially those of you who feel like you don't belong, who've been told you're not good enough, who've faced discrimination or harassment or institutional indifference, your story matters. Your truth matters. And if you refuse to be silent, if you document everything, if you demand accountability, you can change the world. Not might change it. Will change it. I'm living proof. The applause was deafening now. Students were standing. Parents were cheering. Even some of the faculty had tears in their eyes. So here's my challenge to all of us as we leave Westfield. Don't accept injustice just because it's comfortable. Don't stay silent just because speaking up is scary. Don't let institutions fail people just because changing them is hard. Real power isn't inherited. It's earned by choosing justice over silence, truth over convenience, and courage over fear. Every single time, without exception. She looked out at her classmates, at the future leaders and changemakers and ordinary people who'd have to decide what kind of world they wanted to live in. We are the Westfield class of 2026. We are the class that refused to accept corruption as normal. We are the class that rebuilt a broken system. We are the class that proved one person speaking truth can change everything. Let's make sure we never forget that. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Aaliyah walked back to her seat, legs shaking, but heart soaring. She'd done it. She'd survived. She'd graduated. She'd won. After the ceremony, after the caps were thrown and the photos were taken and the goodbyes were said, Aaliyah found her parents waiting by their car. Diana swept her into a crushing hug, laughing and crying at the same time. "I'm so proud of you, baby. So incredibly proud." Caleb pulled them both into his arms, and they stood there in the parking lot, a family that had been broken and rebuilt, holding on to each other like anchors in a storm that had finally passed. "You did it," Caleb whispered into his daughter's hair. "You changed everything." "We did it," Aaliyah corrected. "All of us. Together." "What happens now?" Diana asked. Aaliyah looked back at Westfield Academy. The Gothic spires, the manicured grounds, the place that had tried to break her, and instead had forged her into something stronger. Students were streaming out, heading toward futures full of possibility. The Ethics Council would continue their work. The reforms would hold. Justice had won for now, and, for now, would have to be enough. "Now," she said, "we go home. We rest, and then we keep fighting. Because this was just one school, one system, one small corner of the world. There are thousands more that need fixing." 4 years of college first," Diana said firmly. "You've done enough war for a while." "College is just preparing for the next war," Aaliyah countered, but she was smiling. "A bigger, more complicated one, where the enemies are less obvious and the victories are smaller. But that's okay. I learned from the best." She looked at her father. "One shot center mass, no hesitation. Right, Dad?" Caleb laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like years. "That's my girl, always my girl." They drove home through streets that had become familiar, past the community center where Caleb taught self-defense, past the police station, where Detective Ross was rebuilding trust, one interaction at a time, past coffee shops and schools, and ordinary places where ordinary people were trying to build lives worth living. That night, the Carter family sat on their back porch watching another sunset, and for the first time in 9 years, they were complete. Not unbroken, the scars were still there, would always be there, but healing, growing, becoming something stronger for having survived. "I love you both," Aaliyah said into the comfortable silence. "Thank you for teaching me to fight." "Thank you for teaching us what's worth fighting for," Diana replied. Caleb said nothing, just pulled his family closer, watching the sun set on a day he'd wondered if he'd ever live to see. His daughter had graduated. His family was safe. Justice had prevailed. It wasn't perfect. The world was still broken in 1,000 places. But for now, in this moment with his wife and daughter beside him, it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. And tomorrow when the sun rose again, they'd wake up in a world slightly better than the one they'd inherited. A world where one girl's refusal to be silent had rippled out into real lasting change. A world where truth mattered more than power, where justice was possible, even when it seemed impossible, where courage could be contagious. Somewhere in that world, another student was being bullied. Another family was being targeted. Another system was failing the people it was supposed to protect. But now there was a blueprint. Now there was proof that resistance worked. Now there was hope. And hope, Aaliyah had learned, was the most powerful weapon of all. Because hope didn't accept defeat. Hope documented everything. Hope demanded accountability. Hope built movements. Hope changed the world, one truth at a time. One voice refusing to be silent. One shot placed exactly where it needed to be. Real power wasn't inherited. It was earned by choosing justice over silence. Every single time, without exception, always.